Are we recording? Okay. Happy Monday. Welcome back to the Health Revival Show. We are just, 6-7 weeks out from our event. So exciting.
Yes.
If you've not done so, links are in the show notes. We are going to be hosting the Unstuck Women's Health and Hormone Summit in Arlington Heights, September 5th and 6th. So it's a Friday and a Saturday. Shuttle service to and from the hotel. We got a room block there. And right now, today, we're just planning out where we're going for dinner that night, in between, finding restaurants to host all our VIP gals and speakers. It's going to be a lot. It's like putting on a little wedding, only the wedding is 2 days instead of 1 day.
And I feel like I feel like weddings are easier.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Probably. Because you just have like the checklist and you just know that you
know, like these are the things you need to do versus like we are crafting, our own version of what we want an event to look like. And
I need to go shopping.
And I need to go shopping for what would be a wedding dress, but like is outfits for the event. Because, when you host an event, you have to look good. So
I got a bunch of websites from my friend Ashley.
Good.
And Maya, because she was showing, Maya's getting married. So we were looking at like bachelorette, all those like dresses and stuff. We're going to Mexico for the bachelor party, which will be fun.
Ooh. If you wake up feeling puffy in the morning, your ankles or wrists feel swollen, your rings feel really tight, or that awful puffy face feeling, typically it's a sign that you need electrolytes. And a lot of people actually even get bloated from drinking water because that's not proper hydration. Electrolytes are needed to actually pull the water into the cells in the body. And believe it or not, when you get more hydrated, you look thinner, you look leaner, because water isn't extracellular making you all puffy, it's intracellular hydrating you. And that's why we love Buoy. I squirt it in my water all day long because it's simple, it's effective, and it doesn't have all of the junk that a lot of the powders have. So this is my choice.
Next April.
Okay.
Next April. But, and then Ashley's turning 40 and she's having a disco party. And so she was showing me this. It's perfect for her. Amazing dress she got from Bloomingdale's. Somehow, last one on sale, saved like $500 on this dress.
Gosh.
It is gorgeous.
It's the best.
So I was like, and then they're showing me all these shoe sites and there's these apps that you can go and organize. I'm like, I need you guys to come organize my life. Because
So Nick is going to, he has like the sales thing for his company of all like the top executives at the company are invited, and it's in Vegas and they're doing like a country theme.
Okay.
And so part of it is
you have an outfit.
I don't get to go though. But so he forwarded me the email. He's like, can you please help me dress for this? And so if you donate $50, they're getting you a custom country, like a cowboy hat.
That's awesome.
Because the donation goes to I believe it goes to Child's Cancer Foundation. I'm not sure exactly which one. But anyway, so he's getting that. But then there's 2 nights. And he sent it to me. And the first night is country western with a diamond flare. And I was like, what the F does that mean? And so
It means like old school country with diamonds.
And then the next night is Yellowstone meets Met Gala. And I'm like, okay, this is just ridiculous. First of all, I'm spending like $300 buying him all of these accessories and things for him to wear off Amazon. Nick is the last person that would do any of this.
Not his style.
I got him, I was trying to show him, those like kind of country western shirts that have the stitching. Yeah. He's like, I'm not wearing that. And so I got him a nice, like kind of caramel colored blazer.
Okay. With
a white button down and one of those, necklaces that, and then a big belt with like a big belt face that has a bowl with horns and an American flag on it. And
this is just like so opposite of him.
So if you know my husband, this is the last thing that he would do. So I tried to make it like as toned down, but with some accessories to go with it. And then the other night I got him, I was like, get a denim button down. Like get a denim button down. You can wear it with some cowboy boots and, I don't know. Jeans.
Well, oh no.
It'll be too much denim then.
Denim,
anyways, I am dressing him currently for this. And I'm just like,
fantastic.
I cannot right now. So, yeah. And I was like, and then you get to go dress like a cowboy and I don't even get to be there. I love that look on men. Like the rugged Western
I feel
look.
like you just need to look up some of the famous like country people. See like what are they wearing?
Yeah.
But the diamond flare.
I know.
That's interesting.
That's why I got the necklace thing. because it has like a little bit of a gem on it. So I was like, that can be.
We were at a white trash bash on 4th of July, and it's a friend that it's a family member's mom. I'd never met her before, but she was blinging. And I was like, she went opposite of the white trash bash. Whereas my niece and her boyfriend, they were so funny. She had an ankle bracelet, she had a wig, like all the things. My other niece had one of those. Actually, I should tell her that I need it for a reel. It's a Santa belly. So she looked like she was pregnant. And then they all had like weird like cigarette earrings or just whatever. It was so funny. But then you had the one lady who was just literally diamonds galore. I was like, okay.
Okay. You might have missed the memo.
Yeah.
I love dressing up for things like that.
Parties,
that's my jam.
Yeah. So we need to go shopping. I need like to look beyond just like online. Like,
yes.
Yeah. So we'll get those websites. But anyways, so we hope that you guys can join us. It's going to be a great time. So many people flying in. We were just making our list of everybody that's going to be there. So it'll be a ton of fun. You'll meet my husband, Becca's husband, our whole team, and then some amazing, amazing people in the functional medicine space. So today we are going to talk a little bit about HRT and why you might gain weight going on HRT. Maybe some of the things that will get you thinking about why we approach this in our practice the way we do in terms of addressing the foundations, removing, as many triggers to inflammation, calming down the immune system, calming down the inflammatory fire, the gut fire, what's going on with infections, clearing some of this stuff out before you just start loading your body with hormones because you might just turn into a watery mess.
Yeah, you can make things worse. And I think the hard thing is a lot of women go on HRT expecting to feel better, right? They're told, oh, this is going to help with your energy, with your hot flashes, with your mood, with your weight. So, full disclosure, hormone replacement therapy is not a weight loss drug. End statement, okay? And instead of experiencing these benefits that they hear about on social media or their friends told them about, they get blindsided with weight gain, bloating, water retention. And all of that comes back to typically one of three things or a combination of these three things. There could be a couple small things going on, but these are like the big root pieces that we find become the big issue, especially when you account for ahead of that the dose, the type. Like if you go on too high of a dose too fast, you throw in an 150 milligram testosterone pellet and you've never been on HRT before, like good luck. Hope it goes well, right? Because for a lot of women, they don't know how sensitive or not they are to their hormones. They don't know the environment that they're putting them in. And so that's number one, is the environment you put the hormones into matters, okay? Think of, I love this analogy, your body like soil. If it's inflamed, if it's depleted, even the best seeds in dead soil will not manifest and grow properly, right? And so if you have a sluggish metabolism, you have poor gut health, you are dealing with chronic inflammation, autoimmunity, all of these things that are not managed, adding estrogen into the mix, for example, can amplify an immune response. Our immune system has estrogen receptors all over it. And so you go from low estrogen, you were probably experiencing a lot of immune symptoms there. Now you've increased estrogen. If you go too much too fast, or if you are sensitive to your estrogen, or we'll get to this on a later date, on a later part of this podcast, you are not detoxing estrogen well, guess what? Now you're going to go the opposite direction. You're going to stimulate that immune system. You're going to stimulate inflammation, and estrogen is a water-retaining hormone. And so people experience a lot of this inflammatory symptoms, right? You can ramp up what are called cytokines, which are these like inflammatory messengers in the immune system. You can get more joint pain. You can get more swelling. You can increase that water retention. And so it's basically, hey, there was a fire going on. You ignored the fire. You threw a match on the fire. And now that fire is much worse. Versus you calm the fire down. You have this nice smelly candle in the house and you just put it on that candle. And now everything's much better, right? So like it's the environment that is the problem, and you did not address the environment before putting in that hormone.
Yeah. So in our program, we do healthy gut, happy hormones. And so when we're, doing a client intake, we're looking at blood work, we're typically running some level of a stool test, if it's a GI map, a gut zoom, or whatever. And I think this is important because the sneaky part about perimenopause, 30s, 40s, 50s, is that everything is changing in your microbiome. So when we're saying the environment, we're talking about the terrain. Think of this nose to tail. And we're also thinking about the health of your cells. So as you are aging, we're actually losing stomach acid, certain bacteria that are really important for producing short chain fatty acids, things like Faecalibacterium, Roseburia, some of these microbes that we need to break down, digest, absorb our food, chemical signaling in the body. These get thrown off, and so things aren't moving as well. What happens in that environment is that we also start to see something called beta-glucuronidase typically become an issue. So this is your estrobolome. Now this is things getting recirculated. Your body is way too high with estrogen, not because it's producing too much or because you're taking too much. It's because it's going into that recirculation, and this is bogging down the liver, especially if you're not pooping every day, right? You're not adequately hydrated. You're not flushing toxins and things like that out. Cholesterol is, not doing what it needs to do. Bile is not doing what it needs to do. And so when we think about this, a variety of these things, right? The less butyrate we have, the less good immunological microbes that we have to be our defenders, the more inflammation you have, the more sluggishness that you're going to have from your detox pathways. So that is something just to, kind of think about in terms of the person might also be moving their bowels every day. That's not an issue for them, but we see on a stool test, very high beta-glucuronidase, we need to block that enzymatic activity. So yes, it can be something where we caution, don't put eradication agents in or hormones in, unless, we're thinking it, we've seen the picture of the hormones and it's overtly low. We're going to do a podcast next week talking about even how low estrogen is a problem for people with constipation because it plays such a role in our mucosal lining and keeping things, smooth. So in one aspect, it can help that. But in another aspect, if you put in estrogen to somebody who's really constipated and they're not properly detoxifying, they have a lot going on their estrogen, that could also make things worse. The other big thing here, and this has to do with like mast cells, histamine, cytokines. So estrogen is a histamine liberator. Sometimes you've heard us talk on this podcast about histamine intolerance, needing DAO enzymes or things like quercetin, nettles, vitamin C, what have you. Well, when we have too much building up in the microbiome and our histamine bucket is essentially too full, estrogen is like pouring fuel, into that fire, right? Or just overloading that bucket. And so we know that if you are somebody historically with a lot of PMS issues, I was just talking with one of my clients. I don't know if you did a reel about it. Becca was like, I need to know, like, I'm not feeling creative. And I was like, oh, do it on this because I was just telling a client about it today. So around her periods, she gets more of that nasal congestion, sinus drainage, and those types of things. I'm like, we need histamine support. This is definitely, something going on with your histamine. So again, allergies, skin rashes, migraines, putting in estrogen without having that histamine support can overload the system. To back this up, we would also think about mast cells. When you are somebody who has had these issues over your lifetime, I advise two things. Number one, I would advise an MRT test before you're going to go on some of these hormones to really make sure that you're calming down the mast cells, you're doing the gut work, you're removing a lot of those foods or chemicals that are triggering this chemical kind of warfare in the body. And the second thing is that I would be doing a Dutch or a hormone zoomer to see how you are detoxifying your estrogen. And are you pushing it down more inflammatory pathways or pathways that are more stimulating to, these histamine issues? If that is the case, you're going to go on estrogen or you're going to go on testosterone, and you see too that, hey, maybe I aromatize into estrogen. I need to put in something like an Estro Freedom or, a quercetin or something along the lines to keep the estrogen modulation and detoxification running smoothly. So think of that analogy as like the sink and the drain or the bathtub, right? You want to keep the same flow out as it is coming in at the same pace so things aren't backing up. Those tests would be very valuable to you because, again, for a lot of women, they need estrogen. It's not the estrogen or estradiol's fault. It's the fact that you're putting it into this terrain that's really inflamed. You can't detoxify and keep your histamine and your mast cells at the level that maintains this homeostasis.
Yeah, and that's number two is the histamine overload. So number one is more the inflammatory environment. And we'll see that can show up as autoimmunity, that can show up as weight loss resistance, that can show up as high blood sugars. Inflammation as a whole can be a number of things. And it's also triggered by some of these other things, obviously the histamine overload, the poor detox that we're going to talk about. And I think the poor detox kind of encompasses gut function too, because the gut is obviously a main piece of that detoxification route out of the body. But number two is histamine overload. So yes, if you're already inflamed, the gut is compromising, adding estrogen can be essentially pouring onto that fire even more because it stimulates that histamine release. It downregulates DAO, which is that, enzyme that breaks down the histamine. And that enzyme that breaks it down, a lot of people don't have enough of that to begin with because of potentially genetic mutations, because of that poor gut imbalance that's going on. And so if you're already dealing with allergies, with, skin rashes, migraines, all of the gut dysfunction, I see histamine a lot of times as more constipation. It can be diarrhea, but I see it err more towards the constipation side. That estrogen's ultimately just overloading the system. And progesterone can actually calm down histamine a little bit. It does have the ability to do that, but estrogen in an inflammatory, metabolically unhealthy environment can also cause weight gain. And we see that frequently with people. So, I added in 100 milligrams testosterone and I started retaining more water. It's like, okay, well, there was a problem to begin with. It wasn't the progesterone. You're just putting the progesterone into this environment. So estrogen, which causes this kind of stimulation of the histamine, stimulation of the, suppression of the DAO, people will now end up with more immune activity. They'll end up with more joint pain. I have an exact client that I think of that she was having awful pain overnight. She's had pain for years, like years. She has had constipation for years. She's had all types of detoxification, bile flow issues. And she got to the point where she was recommended estrogen. She put in estrogen and the hot flashes went away, but things progressively got worse. Her pain got worse. Her sleep got worse. All of those things, because high histamine can also cause insomnia for people. It causes you to constantly wake up. And so it wasn't my prescribing, it wasn't my advising, but I eventually was like, I think timing wise, when you added in the estrogen, I know you're 51 years old. I know that you were having hot flashes, but she was having a period every 3 or 4 months. And so she was not completely in menopause. And although it could support some of the symptoms that she had, it made these other symptoms much, much worse.
Was she balancing it with progesterone?
She has progesterone in as well. She's also on spironolactone because she has a lot of DHT predisposition. She has a lot of, she grew up with acne constantly. She grew up with the cystic style of acne. And so very much a complex case, but this is a perfect example of where, yes, estrogen could support one of these symptoms, but is that symptom happening just because of low estrogen, or is it happening because we're inflamed, because we aren't detoxing properly? Because I have seen often that when you lower inflammation, that when you improve detoxification, the night sweats and the hot flashes go away. Mm-hmm. They are not necessarily just a low estrogen problem. So that was an example that very clearly was a histamine, a mast cell problem that estrogen then stimulated and made worse, even though she had low estrogen. Even though labs and even some symptoms could have warranted the estrogen, it made the environment worse.
Was she on testosterone?
Yes.
So I'm curious your thoughts on this. So I actually just had a call with one of my gals. She's postmenopause. She was on way too much progesterone. I think way too much estrogen because she keeps, bleeding and things like that. And I went back and showed her on her Dutch test and we looked at her genetics. I said, I truly believe you are going to be somebody who is going to benefit from doing testosterone, spironolactone, and progesterone and letting some of this estrogen flush out of your body for a period of time. And then when you go back, bring it in so slowly. Because I think so many providers are putting in too many things at once. They're not considering the aromatization. They're not considering the person's genetics, their detox pathways. She's also had a history of chronic constipation. What have we historically, way back when I first worked with her a couple years ago, looked at on her stool test? High levels of beta-glucuronidase. Guess what else she has? Insomnia and all these histamine issues, to the point too where no quercetin and DAO enzyme is going to touch this, right? So that was just my thought to her. I said, I think that you need to go back and talk with your prescriber about doing testosterone and spironolactone in place of estrogen. Let it aromatize there a little bit. Give yourself a few months with your progesterone, keeping it at that reasonable dose, because I am still not sold on super high doses of progesterone. Reasonable dose there. And, when we think about anything that we're shifting with hormones, generally there's a few weeks to a couple months that it's going to take to see that. So I was just curious what your thoughts might be.
No, I would agree. And, I was the perfect example of trying to go a little higher on testosterone. And immediately the next month I had horrible ovulation. I had pain all the way through my period because the estrogen coming back online after the period, it was much higher because genetically I've seen I aromatize at a really high rate. I push my testosterone to estrogen. Even though I don't have outright high estrogen, I had very much estrogen dominant symptoms. I was like bloated to the max not because I put estrogen in, I had testosterone in, and I was trying to increase dose to see a threshold. and it down-regulated into, or I'm sorry, it aromatized into estrogen. And so I think it can be a very good route to go that's a little bit safer. Yes, are you going to see it a little bit slower effect? For sure. But estrogen's a powerful hormone. Mm-hmm. It's a very powerful hormone. And for a lot of women, especially because of our exposures today to birth controls, to environmental factors, there's just so many things that affect our estrogen receptors and how we experience estrogen that I think you need to be very careful with putting estrogen in. It's just my personal opinion. And so what we did in this case, and we used the ketotifen, and it's really interesting because ketotifen is a mast cell stabilizer. But what happens initially is that it starts to basically reduce the release of histamine, cytokines, prostaglandins. And when it stabilizes this thing, it prevents future dumping of those inflammatory things. But if mast cells have been chronically activated for a long time, the immune system basically starts to go clear out the backlog of them. So it starts to basically clean up what it couldn't. And when that happens, this cellular debris, these inflammatory cytokines, that clean up can involve immune activation. And leads to essentially worsening, and now the client's getting better. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, there's so many aspects to this, especially when putting in HRT and the histamine and mast cell. Mast cell's a beast. Like, it is, in and of itself, it's a beast to deal with, because when you're in that state, it's really hard to help someone because their body's so reactive. And so you have to calm down the reactivity. But anyways, histamine is number 2. The estrogen, in particular, estrogen specifically, can make histamine release mast cell situations much, much worse. And then the third one is poor detox.
If you feel tired all the time and you're drinking water, you're probably missing electrolytes, because you need electrolytes to get intracellularly hydrated. We love Buoy because this is an easy way to get in sodium, potassium, magnesium, and trace minerals into your day without any of the junk fillers that most powders use.
Lymphatic flow. So when you take estrogen, it doesn't just like disappear into your body and go to stay at your cells and do the thing that it should do. Your body has to break it down and it has to move it out. And one of the number one issues I see with women in perimenopause is their ability to detoxify via the liver. Because we think that if you have a liver, it does it itself, but you don't think about all the things throughout your life, alcohol, birth control, medications, exposures to things that the liver has to deal with. And then on top of that, methylation abilities, glucuronidation abilities, your ability to feed what the body needs, because the body's liver processes have a lot of cofactors and nutrients that it needs, and most women undereat. And so then also you're dehydrated, or you're chronically stressed, you're not moving your body, or you're moving it too much, and then that lymphatic drainage gets sluggish, and you aren't breathing well. Your lymphatic system, breath is the pump. Your blood flow, your heart's the pump. Your heart's going to pump no matter what. Your lymphatic system, you have to breathe properly. Most people are very shallow breathers. Mm-hmm. They don't sleep well, which is part of what helps trigger lymphatic drainage. And so all of these things then build up, and you aren't draining properly, and it's sluggish. And then estrogen can build up. And when estrogen gets too high, it triggers the release of what's called aldosterone, which is a hormone that makes you retain sodium in water. And so the result, swelling, bloating, my pants don't fit. I'm fat. I'm gaining weight. No, my dear, you are swollen. You are watery. There is a difference, okay? And so when estrogen increases basically this production of what's called angiotensin hormone, it leads to that aldosterone. And aldosterone affects the kidneys. And and this is when females that have large weight fluctuations and get it in their hips and their thighs and their butt, hello estrogen, and hello poor estrogen detox that then triggered aldosterone and triggered the water retention.
We just had a conversation last week about one of my clients, and they were recommending putting in estrogen, and I was like, please don't. Mm-hmm. Please don't. You have finally stopped taking these 7 to 10 pound swings.
Yeah.
There's so much more that we can do with the progesterone and testosterone. She's too young for that, right? And so it's just one of those things where it's, sometimes I want to be, honoring people who are prescribing HRT because they're going in with the information that they're provided, right? Whether that's blood work, a health history form, yada, yada. But for some of the cases, especially the chronic cases that Becca and I work with, and we know this person inside and out, their genetics, their immune system, response, what they're more prone to, the things that we've worked on cleaning up. It's like, yes, in theory, this could be helpful. But for this person right now, I don't think so, because she's not even 45 yet, right? But what happens is, because she's feeling some of these symptoms of like being 120 years old, they're like, well, let's just go ahead and put estrogen in. And I'm like, I don't think it's time for that. And so that also brings us to the point about the detoxification. So we have glucuronidation, we have methylation, we have all these different detox pathways. But what we also see is issues with our bile. So we have our liver that gives us our primary bile acids. Those are then turned into secondary bile acids. I was just talking to somebody about like TUDCA this weekend and being a specific type of bile acid. But these secondary bile acids, they're not just waste. Bile acids should go and sequester hormones, toxins, fats, basically, be your internal detergent, as we always call it, to scrub things and emulsify things and then remove it all from the body through your, your stool and everything. But they act like hormones. So this influences digestion. This influences your motility. This influences your metabolism, your insulin, the immunological response, and again, liver function. So it's kind of going back to saying, if we have detoxification pathways downstream that are clogged, that is where you start. If we look at, for example, a Dutch test, we can see, and we've done other podcasts, you guys could visualize this, but think of it as like a reverse pyramid where we see your colon there, we see, all of these other organ systems that help us detoxify. You have to unclog the drain. So you're looking at phase 3. So we look at phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase 3 is where you start. You don't start in phase 1. You have to unclog the drain and make sure that you're supporting all of these different pathways before you go in and start putting more into that funnel, or you're basically just going to end up with things backing up. And then again, your immune system just goes haywire, and all this stuff is just spilling over everywhere. And that's why you feel worse. That's why we see insulin resistance sometimes get worse, this wateriness, puffiness. And then like you were saying with your other client, it fixed one issue, but it caused 5 other issues. That's the same thing with medications, by the way. Sometimes that happens. And so hormones are powerful. They are strong chemical messengers. Do the work ahead of time to prepare your body, and then recognize too, if I do that, like I was telling somebody today, you could save a whole heck of a lot of money, because then you're having to take less because you actually feel it. You're more sensitive to it.
Yeah. One of my clients, Robin, she has done so much work in the past. She came in with lipidemia. She came in with weight loss resistance. She has a history of she did bodybuilding shows at the age of 50. She's fit, right? But she was so swollen and had the estrogen dominance. She had the major hips, she had the butt, the thighs, tiny little waist, and so much lipidemia from the poor lymphatic flow and from the inability to detox well. And so and she had a ton of gut issues, on and off loose stools, just gas that wouldn't go away, would come and go. We did 9 months, 12 months of work. She got to a really good spot. Then we added in hormones. At the age of 61, you guys, we added in hormones. She feels better than she's ever felt in her life. She looks better than she has in 25 years. We waited until we knew the environment and the terrain was an optimal, and then we used the hormones to optimize it even further. And that is what you do in an ideal situation. Sometimes people need them earlier on in the process, but it doesn't discount the fact that you still have to do the process of optimizing the terrain and the environment. So this is just a reminder. There are no shortcuts. HRT is amazing. We recommend it. It's powerful, but it can be powerful in a negative way too if you do not focus on the things you have to do to create the foundation first.